Today's lesson is going to be on understanding art terms. We're going to talk about realistic, non-objective, and abstract. Our first piece that we're going to talk about, when we have a work of art, it can fall into any of those three categories. Realistic basically means that the object is going to look exactly like it would. So think of like a photograph. If we took a photograph, that's a pretty realistic interpretation of what the actual object is. Some realistic artists that you might be familiar with are Leonardo da Vinci, Charles White, and Michelangelo. And James Rosenquist was another, as well as others. So Leonardo da Vinci, if we've all probably have seen the Mona Lisa before, if we look at this one, it's a fairly realistic interpretation of what an actual person would look like, and we're thinking in this case what the actual Mona Lisa person looked like. Charles White, in this case, we're not talking about a painting, it's a drawing like we've done in class with just pencil and graphite on a piece of paper, but yet when we're finished we have a fairly realistic, again, interpretation of what it is. Michelangelo, on the other hand, and I know that we're in 7th grade so we can handle looking at pictures that are like this, is on the chapel of the Sistine Chapel, on the ceiling, excuse me. And this is one of the ones that he has, probably the most famous one from that ceiling of the creation of Adam. Again, a realistic interpretation. James Rosenquist is another one. Now this one is still realistic, but he chose to capture a smaller piece of that particular picture. And that's a lot what our assignment's going to be today. So this one is called Hey, Let's Go for a Ride in 1961. So they've got their 7-Up bottle over here and a person in the background. We can still tell what that would possibly be. So we go from realistic, now we're moving down the spectrum into abstract. Abstract, and I know we've heard this art term before, is when we take that original object, so think of those paintings that we just looked at, and we distort them or change them just a little bit, but we're not going to lose all of the recognizable features for it. Some abstract artists would be Aaron Douglas, Pablo Picasso, George Braque, Sonia Delaney, and a lot of others. Here's a picture of Aaron Douglas's. You guys kind of make a noise over there, it's too loud. Of Aaron Douglas, sorry about that. Aaron Douglas, and if we look at this particular picture, when I show you the name of it, it says Into Bondage. Yeah, now when we see the title, we can see, yeah, there's a slave ship you're probably noticing in the background. I see some people's hands in chains. We're probably talking about slavery. So I can still tell what the picture is talking about, but when I look at it, it is not a picture. It is a representation of what that activity might be. So we have some leaves in the foreground. Like I said, we have that ship in the background. We have people marching their way down, probably to get on maybe a slave ship or something of that sort. Because if we know what the word bondage means, it's talking about being bonded into slavery in this case. Pablo Picasso, like we talked about when we did our upside down drawing, he did a picture of Igor Stravinsky, which would definitely have been in the abstract category. This particular one, we can talk more about this in class, and we will talk aloud about it, but it was basically a war that took place in this city in Spain, and he painted it because it was something that really bothered him, and he painted a picture using just one value, so we have a monochromatic, but as you can tell, we can see certain things. Look like we have a bowl over here, light bulb, looks like an eye, and if we keep looking, there's just more and more things that pop out at us. So there are some things that look like they would be real, but it's borderline abstract because they're not going to be actual things. So similar to possibly the surreal pictures that we were talking about previously. George Braque, who was a friend of Picasso's, here's his. This is definitely abstract, getting more towards that spectrum of abstract. And if we look at it, this one's called Violin and Candlestick. Look at it for a moment and see if you can figure out where that violin and candlestick. So again, abstract means he was looking at a violin and a candlestick when he came up with this particular piece. Can you see them? I'm looking over here. I see like the edge of possibly a violin, maybe another one in here, possibly the bow of another one here, and then a candlestick, possibly some other ones as we're looking into it. So you can possibly see where that may have come from. The next one we have, looking at like, oh, it doesn't look like it's anything. But if you look at the title, 3 studies for the electric prism. A prism, if you remember from your science classes, deals with a little triangular piece of glass that is long on one side, looks like a rectangle, and then a triangle on the ends. And it splits light into its different colors. So here we have one, here we have one. I mean, she's got 3 studies. I like looking at this one because when I see it, if I just look at it and observe it, I start seeing like people pop out, just other things start coming into me, and I don't know if that's what she intended, but that's what I see when I look at it. So look at that for a few seconds and see if you can see anything else in it. Then our last category, so we go from realistic, which is what the object actually looks like, to abstract, where we're looking at the object, but we're changing things up. It's just kind of our interpretation of what it's going to be. And now we're moving into non-objective. When we are finished, we still have that same candlestick and violin per se. The first one would be a very good interpretation of it. If it was realistic, it would look exactly like a violin and a candlestick. If it's abstract, it looks a lot like Brock, one that he had that we looked at. If it's non-objective, we may not be able to even tell that that's a violin and a candlestick in the picture. So when we're finished, it was using a real object, but we really can't tell what those objects or the inspiration was. Wassily Kandinsky, he was a conductor, a musician. He wrote lots of works of music, and he would get into painting and make his based on painting. So I'll show you one of those in just a second. Jackson Pollock, he was an interesting fellow. Mondrian, Norman Lewis, Frankenthaler, and then again lots of others. So lots of artists are going to fall into all 3 of these categories, but when we think of non-objective, these particular ones we have in front definitely fit this particular characteristic. So Kandinsky, this one is titled Composition 8, excuse me. And if you look at it, can you kind of see maybe what kind of music that might sound like? It looks like it's got a lot of movement to it, lots of up and down bursts. It would be a lively piece of music, I would imagine. Jackson Pollock, if we look at this one, it's called Lavender Mist, number 1. He was an artist that was ridiculed during his time period for quite a few different reasons and just never felt like he fit in. And if you look at this one, I want you to take a look at the actual size of this piece. 7 feet by just about 10 feet. It's huge. In order to get this look, what he would do is he would take basically gallons of paint, put a canvas on the floor of his barn, and he just walked around with a paintbrush, dipped in there, and just dripped all sorts of different paints around. And when people looked at it, they would say, well, yeah, anybody could do that. But really, he had a talent for it, and when they tried it, it is a lot harder than what it looks. Here's another one, non-objective. This one's called Composition with yellow, blue, and red. And if you look at any piece that you see like this, he definitely has his style. He has many that are like that. Norman Lewis. I like looking at this one to start with. To me, I like those colors. They have some of the warm colors and cool colors. Just looks real kind of fun. And it's called Pink Boogie. You could see how that might look like it. Frankenthaler. So again, if we look at it, yeah, we may be able to pick something on out, like a little circular shape here, some other fuzzy stuff over here. But when we see the title, Seeing the Moon on a Hot Summer Day, it gives us a little bit better interpretation. Yeah, I could see how she might think that. It's got those real warm, rich colors to it. So now let's take a look at all 3 of these different types put in place. So here's our original image. And I know that's not coming out real great, but if you look at it, hopefully you can kind of get an idea of what it might be. Do you see what it is? It is a lady with her shoe, and she's got kind of animal print shoe. So here's the high heel of it. Here is a realistic drawing that a student has done, and to me that actually shows it better than the actual picture. So it's realistic. It looks just like what they saw in front of them. And that's pretty much what we've been doing in class. We take a drawing and we try to recreate it with our stuff to make it look realistic. Here's abstract. What did they do to change the original drawing or original picture to make it abstract? Hopefully you notice that they put the leopard print all over everything in the background and on the lady's foot. So that's making it more abstract. Could they have done more? Yeah, absolutely. So this is still fairly realistic. It's just getting to be borderline. And then we have non-objective. So all 3 of these are based off of this original picture. Realistic, these are all done in pencil in this case, abstract to non-objective. So if we look at the non-objective, really the only thing left is this strip up the middle and maybe the floor pattern. They've taken those three and just mixed them up. Here's another example. Can you tell what it is? What we have is an African ceremony where they're wearing their masks and attire. Their information's right in front of us here, so now we've gone to the abstract. Yeah, it's still kind of similar to the realistic. In this case, they don't have to be. And then we go to non-objective, which if I looked at this, I would not have figured out that it was this. And our last one. I know this one's hard to see, but if we look at the actual picture, here's a realistic interpretation of it. It's an orchid in a vase. Then we go to abstract, and I like this abstract more so because this is actually pushing towards almost non-objective. And here's our non-objective. Looks easy, doesn't it? But I'm guessing that would be difficult to achieve. Okay, so for our assignment today, sorry about that, what you're going to be doing is you're going to get a magazine, and when the teacher hands it out, make sure that you keep it on the side that's facing up, because that's the side that you're going to need to have that ready to go. Then they're also going to hand you out a viewfinder, which is just a piece of paper with a hole in the middle. What you're going to do is you're going to move that around your paper until you find something that looks interesting to you. And we don't want to have something directly in the center. We want to try to mix it up a little bit, and we want to have something that's really interesting to the eye. So in this case, ours is actually going to be somewhat abstract, but we want to try and push that to just about non-objective. So when we're finished, we don't want anything that's really too recognizable. So if I went like this, yeah, I kind of like that. Maybe I'm pulling it over this way a little bit more, or up and down. And once I have that found out, I'm going to take my colored pencils, and on my paper, what you're going to have is you're going to grab a circular shape, and we'll have you trace a circle onto your paper. It's going to be fairly large. And then what you're going to do is you're going to find all those different values, and you're going to work on layering. So let's say here's where that tomato is. We all know that's the tomato. I'm going to use one colored pencil to fill that in. You cannot use your regular pencils, just the colored pencils. And then maybe I'm going to find another color that's within that range, and I'm going to go a little bit harder. So when I'm finished, I want values of 10. Nothing less. We want real rich values to achieve those different spots. So when you finish this, you're going to have this entire piece of paper looking just like this, except now it's going to be expanded on your paper. So when we are finished, we're going to put them onto paper frames, and you're going to come up with something like this. So when you're finished, we will have, there's my hamburger, and to looking at this one, it's not quite to a value of 10, so I'd want to make sure that I go back and make that. So that's what you'll be working on. Again, criteria is no regular pencil lead, only colored pencil, and a value of 10. Looking to achieve those same colors and patterns and whatnot. So when I look at my paper, I want to make sure when I'm finished, yeah, I can maybe think that that was something that I recognize, but it's more abstract. Good luck.